The bell stands for Upaya or Karuna. So Karuna means compassion, but it's bigger than compassion. It's really outreach. That's why in the Tibetan tradition, Karuna and Upaya are virtual synonyms. Karuna is compassion, and Upaya I would translate as, it's often translated, what's the standard sort of artificial Buddhist English translation of Upaya? Skillful means, you got it. So what does skillful means refer to? What is the connotation of the word upaya? Well, if I were to give an idiomatic translation, I would probably translate it something like outreach. Remember I said that when you ring the bell to call people, or you ring the bell to begin or end a sit. To me, that's like the coolest job to do, because you're reaching out. The bell, it calls sentient beings back to the source, back to the practice. So I would say upaya is the ways that one reaches out in order to engage people in the practice. Because just sort of trying to sell people on emptiness or suffering, that might be maybe something the general public doesn't exactly relate to right off the bat. Guess what? I've got good news. You are a soulless robot designed to suffer and too stupid to know that. And the only good part is that you're gonna die. But that's not so great, because it's almost certain that the next time around you're going to be born as an even stupider soulless robot, suffering even more. So this is the Buddhist message. And you know what? There's damn good reason to say this, okay? And I don't know about the reincarnation piece, but actually, I agree with the soulless robot designed to suffer, but that's not exactly the whole picture, fortunately. And that is certainly not a way to bring in J-random human being to the path and try to convince them of that. That's like the Iceman cometh, you know, you're trying to sell a person on death. It's like, who wants to buy this product? There are more approachable ways of formulating the same thing, and that's upaya. So the Buddhist tradition has always thought that it's important to have ways that people can enter the practice. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's been done differently in different cultures. One of the ways, let's be honest, that you get people engaged is you impress them with psychic powers and magic. That's something people can relate to in certain cultures at certain times. Most cultures in previous times, and that's where Buddhism existed, in those cultures. So, you know, I mean, how are you going to convince Kublai Khan to, not destroy your temple, but help you build it, okay? Well, you better be able to do magic better than his guys. So that was one of the upayas. And it certainly is legitimate, I suppose, within a certain cultural context. People like to have their fortune told. If you go to we talk about fortune cookies, okay? It's almost like a stereotype, but Fortune telling is a really, really old trope in Chinese culture. Although actually most people don't know the fortune cookies come from Japan. Originally, most people don't know that, but look at the Wikipedia. Is where they come from. But anyway, fortunes, telling your fortune, that's the beginning of Chinese literature. That's the I Ching. That's what it is. That's like how to interpret, these hexagrams and so forth. So the culture likes to have their fortune told. So every Chinese temple, if you talk to the average Chinese person, what do you do at the temple? Why do you go to the temple? Well, you throw these either pieces of wood or coconut, and they fall in a certain way, and then you draw a fortune, and okay, so it goes. So that's an upaya. That brings people into your temple. Food is a big deal in Chinese culture. So Mahayana Buddhism in China is about not eating meat. So you develop an incredible vegetarian cuisine. And the temples provide that food. So people go, they get a good vibe, they do a good deed, they didn't eat meat, but they ate something that looked and tasted exactly like meat, but was made out of tofu. And they reproduced all the high cuisine of China in vegetarian food. Okay, it's an upaya. It brings someone into the temple. And then, hopefully some connection will be made, and from there, things will happen. So all this kind of stuff is looked upon as upaya. Upaya is sort of a tricky thing, right? I think you can see that there could be a little bit of a slippery slope here. In terms of, honesty. People like miracles. So, hey, miraculous things happen. These what do they call them? The relics and things that reproduce themselves every day and get more and more and more. It's like, can't help thinking that someone's manipulating that. Okay, but it's an upaya. It can be justified. So it's a sort of tricky thing. We want to bring people in. We want to make things relevant. You're in 12th century Japan. You just came back from China. You learned this cool liberation path called Chan or Zen. And who's running the show in 12th century Japan? Samurai. They're running the show. So how are you going to get them not to beat you up, but rather to get interested in what you have to say? Well, what's relevant to a samurai? To kill and be killed without fear or conscience is what's relevant to the job of a samurai. You know what? We can provide that. You want that? We can provide that. Now you can say, whoa, that was a bad thing to do. I mean, the Buddha would it's like in the original rules in the Vinaya, Buddhist monks aren't even allowed to talk about wars and conflicts. What to say to train warriors. On the other hand, thanks to that, there are now people in Japan who are enlightened Zen masters and taught me. And maybe if that hadn't happened in the 12th century, that would not have been the case. I remember the first time I ever stayed in a Japanese Zen temple. It was a place called Manpukuji in Kyoto. And they what I noticed was that these busloads of company workers would come in. It would be like a giant, like 3 buses, and they're all workers from a certain section of a company, like Mitsubishi or Matsushita, or one of these big Japanese companies. And they'd all be like in suits or in their company sort of what do we call those, like or the jumpsuits kinds of things. Okay, and I noticed like they coming into the temple. What's going on? So I asked the Roshi, what is this? And he says, well, they bring in, they send a section of workers to spend a week living in the Zen temple together. Essentially to do a mini session, a sort of mild retreat kind of situation, but mostly just to like be in the temple and see what that's like. So I said, why? why do the companies do this? This is a long, long time ago. This is like 1969 or something. 1968, way back, the first time I was in Japan. So why do the companies send their workers? Well, it's a team building exercise, is what it is. And this is Japanese team building, send them to a Zen temple and toughen them up a little bit, because they have to, it hurts, you have to sit still, you're tired, and you get a sort of paramilitary team building kind of experience. And that's why the companies do this. They pay for it because it's to their advantage as a company. So, okay, fine. It's sort of cool, actually, in a way, that's their version of team building, sort of classical. On the other hand, I did ask the guy pointedly, don't you think that they're exploiting you? They're using you for corporate goals. You're a spiritual teacher, you're a Zen teacher. In those days I was pretty rude. And I hadn't done much practice, and I had a lot of chutzpah. And I used to like to ask impertinent questions from people. But that was okay, because I actually learned a lot from the answers. Because often the answers were, I was impertinent, but the answers were humble. And that was a learning experience. So he said, well, it's true, to a certain extent. But if we get 60 people coming in here, maybe 1 or 2 of them will take to the practice and will continue with it. And that justifies doing it. So, and then he said, this is Hoben. And Hoben is the Japanese word for Upaya. So this is the outreach. So you reach out to people. Zen and the art of. People like to do art in Japan. They like to do flower arranging and tea ceremony. So you sort of make the possibility that they can get a little bit of samadhi as they are doing their art, their flowers or their tea or whatever. And then this makes things relevant to the culture. So what I find interesting is that, of course, history repeats itself. Now it's coming to the West. How is it making, by it I mean Buddhism, this practice, how is it making a really significant inroad into the culture? Okay, how is that happening? It's happening because of the M word, and by M I don't mean meditation. Okay, what's the M word that I'm thinking of? Movies? No. Mindfulness. Mindfulness.
Oh yeah, that one.
This is amazing, okay? Mindfulness, that word, will probably change the course of human history. That word. Just the way it's come down now. Because mindfulness is an attentional skill set. It can be translated different ways, but it's an attentional skill set. And these attentional skills can be used for everything. They can be used for everything. They can be used for pain management. They can be used for improving your tennis game. Okay? They can be used for recovery. It can be used for everything. And it's not terribly threatening. The other M word, it's pretty accepted. I mean, even the AMA, if you get something, if you have heart or cancer or something, and you ask the AMA recommendations, that M word, the meditation word, you'll actually find there. So that's somewhat acceptable, the M word that means meditation. But still, there are sections of society that meditation just sounds weird and an invasion of my personal world. It's like asking someone to pray in a certain way, you're asking them to meditate. But telling people, hey, we're going to give you some exercises that develop attentional skills. And then we're going to show you how to apply those attentional skills to what you're interested in, what's important to you. If you've got chronic pain, that's important, okay? Et cetera, et cetera. That's something that the average person is not going to, it's not going to catch in their craw. It's not going to seem weird or unnatural. Especially, one of the things that I've been considering is to not assume that the first way you train people in mindfulness is to get them to sit down. Because there's really nothing that says you have to start with a seated practice or that your eyes have to be closed. Now this is really interesting because this, to me, this is the modern Upaya. We're reaching out to people. Now, what I decided to do was, okay, if we're flying under the banner of an attentional skill set, well, we want them to apply these skills in a way that they're going to dramatically grow. So the base, I outline this in the what is mindfulness, what this whole strategy is. So the categories of the basic mindfulness system are designed to produce insights right off the bat. So that it's not just that they're going to get a little bit of concentration kind of thing, but they're explicitly developing concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity, and they're learning how to parse their sensory experience in such a way that the fundamental insights can arise without us trying to get them to believe a certain thing. So we're going to provide you with an attentional skill set. We're going to provide you with a way of analyzing your sensory experience, which is, it's not any doctrine or belief system. It's obviously is the case that we see and we hear and we feel. And then people can hopefully start to have really significant experiences. So that to me is a modern and incredible opportunity for Upaya.